Welcome to the Dark Shadows Podcast with your co-hosts Vicky Ray, Tom Diamond, and Keith Chowgle, bringing you all the odd goings-on from Collinsport, Maine.
Hello, welcome to Litter License Podcast, and today we're discussing Dark Shadows, episodes 331 to 352. And before we get started, let's find out who's with us. Today we have Tom Diamond. Hello, Tom.
Hello, Keith. I'm looking at you acting like a broadcaster, and so I decided to try my hand at it. No, seriously, thank you, guys. Really nice to be here again.
Well, if you think this is bad enough, wait till you hear our synopsis this week.
God forbid.
I know. That actually went very well. I mean, come on now.
It did. Very quick. And we also have Vicky Ray. Hello, Vicky. How are you?
Hello, everybody.
And Jesse Fultz. Hello, Jesse.
Hello, folks.
And myself, Keith Shago. And as we got rid of the roses and thorns, considering our world is topsy-turvy with everything going in, that basically we wanted to make sure that we weren't coming across too negative, so we scrapped that until the world becomes a better place. But what we will discuss is, what have we been up to? So, Jesse, what have you been up to since last time we spoke to you?
Well, I've been working on some stuff, some projects, keeping myself busy, art and all that jazz. I think now is the perfect time for all of that kind of fun stuff. If you want to have if you have a hobby that you're trying to get back into, I think COVID is the perfect time to do so, to catch up on things. If you're not working, some people are still working, like doctors, and some factories are still open and doing stuff if they're not on unemployment. So yeah, I guess that's what I've been up to.
And what about yourself, Vix? What are you been up to?
Well, we've been trying to catch up with all the grueling BMX state qualifiers and stuff, so we can get Asher Coyle. He's qualified now, so we're just waiting for the state races to start. And we got a few more Gold Cup stuff to go. And I've been watching some really fucked up movies, but I have to say, I was talking to Keith about it yesterday. Castle Freak, not for the faint of heart. Definitely watch it. It was on Amazon. I think it was a Joe Bob Briggs pick or something. And I watched Warrior Nun. I binge watched the whole first season. Totally loved it. Glad you guys suggested it. Other than that, I've been catching up on the Dark Shadow stuff and reading and just doing the COVID typical activities. But other than that, life's good.
And what about yourself, Tom? Anything to add to the wonderment of lockdown?
Well, first I'll talk about the wonderment of Tom. I'm 85 pounds down now in terms of the post-surgery diet that I'm on. I'm pretty happy about that. Got a new webcam, which all of you guys can see, so you can see my smiling face, or my serious face, depending on when I get tired. And let's see. I do want to mention that one of the future Dark Shadows stars for the new fans, and the old fans know very well, Christopher Pennock. We won't talk too much about who he's going to play, but he's going to be on in a little while, and he's going to play some significant characters on the show. Chris is in his 70s and lives in California, and he had a little bit of a rough patch with his health, but that is straightening out. And his daughter, and I don't mind saying it because she's now symptom-free. She went through some COVID, but she's now symptom-free, doing very well. That just came through today. He's very happy about that. He's also happy about the way his health condition is progressing, and I'm sure we all wish him well. So other than that, I'm busy with other projects. non-related. I do want to say something about Facebook, and this was something that I encountered as the Facebook Dark Shadows fans know. Various Facebook groups. I'll always put notifications as to when our podcasts are happening and who's going to be on and what episodes we're covering. I've done pretty well in terms of blanketing as many podcasts as many Facebook websites as I know about. But recently, Facebook started a crackdown without looking to see what the posts were about, which were completely innocuous. They put me in Facebook jail for 2 days. And that's happened twice already. So what I'm asking, I am putting them out in terms of a limited amount. I don't want to get too many out there and then get blocked. But I have asked that any Facebook people that see this on the Dark Shadows groups, please do me and us a favor and look up Dark Shadows websites on Facebook. And that's very easy to do. By across the top, there's an address field, and just type in Dark Shadows or type in the Dark Shadows stars, and see if it's on there. And if it's on there, you don't have to do anything. If it isn't on there, if you could please share it with them, that would be really, really appreciative. Other than that, thank God we're all still here.
Barely.
And as far as me, I haven't really been up to a hell of a lot. I'm working quite a bit at the moment. Did a bunch of interviews with some quite, well, I guess they're from B to A celebrities that we will be coming on for season 4 and season 5. But
very impressive.
Got a couple of cool ones, I have to admit.
Very impressive.
And I got a couple more lined up that I'll be doing in the second week of August, so that's quite good. So
we have something coming up. I'm not going to say on Dark Shadows. I'm not going to say who, but it'll be an interesting surprise. I also, by the way, want to mention before I forget, I started watching Dead Zone, the TV series, and I loved it. I mean,
I've not watched that yet.
Oh my God, Keith watched it. He was telling me.
Is that Netflix?
Yes.
Or Amazon?
No, Amazon. Excuse me. It's on Amazon and Tubi. Amazon and Tubi, which is the same thing, literally. But Amazon Prime. But they're great. I was very, very surprised, and it was on in the 2000s, 6 years worth of episodes. I highly recommend it. I really do.
So what we're going to do is, before we get into the crux of our Dark Shadows episodes, we're going to cut to Story Geek. And Story Geek will be telling us what you can watch while you're in lockdown during the COVID-19. So take it away, Story Geek.
What movies and TV shows should you be watching the week of July 20th? I'm Jay Shear, executive producer of the Story Geeks podcast, and here are the movies and TV shows you can watch from home. Nothing new in wide release movies available for rent, so we'll jump straight into streaming. On Netflix, The Last Dance. This is a must-watch for sports fans. It's essentially the story of Michael Jordan's career. It originally aired on ESPN, but has been added to Netflix. I'm 2 episodes in and loving it. Metacritic gives it a 91. It's well worth your time, especially if you're a sports fan. Pride and Prejudice has also been added to Netflix. My wife will be thrilled to hear that because she loves period piece films. And Metacritic gives Pride and Prejudice an 82. And if you've been waiting to see Zac Efron's dad bod, which, by the way, went from describing Homer Simpson to now describing a guy who apparently decided to stop taking steroids. Anyway, I digress. Down to Earth with Zac Efron can also be found on Netflix and has actually been trending since Amazon added it to the service. So apparently Zac Efron and his dad bod are very popular. But Metacritic gives Zac Efron's attempt at a dad bod a 60. I say give the guy a break. We all need carbs, but what do I know? In addition to The Last Dance, my wife and I are also watching the recently added episodes of the 90s game show Supermarket Sweep. If you've never seen it, then you've never seen contestants run around a supermarket for 20 minutes. And it's a game show. And yes, I'm watching reruns from the 90s. If that doesn't describe 2020, I'm not sure what does. There's nothing all that notable on Amazon Prime or Hulu, but Disney Plus has added Solo, a Star Wars story, and X-Men Apocalypse. Only one of those is good. It does not rhyme with a schmocalypse. X-Men Apocalypse is just not good. Just putting that out there. But if you haven't seen Solo, that is a fun Star Wars movie. Many people didn't see it when it came out in theaters, but it's worth a watch. It's a really, really fun movie. On the Story Geeks podcast, we're in the middle of our independent video game series. The next indie video game we're playing is called Journey. Listen to the team talk about it this coming Monday on the Story Geeks podcast. You can find the Story Geeks podcast on your preferred podcast provider. Until next week, this has been Jay Shear from the Story Geeks podcast, and I hope you have fun streaming movies and TV shows from home.
Hey everybody, Tom Diamond here, and I am going to now talk about the block for episodes 331 to 352, and let's see what we have. Now, as far as stars are concerned, Robert Geringer, Dr. Woodward, is in episode 331, and 334 is his last appearance. And frankly, I'm going to miss him because I always liked the Dr. Woodward character as interpreted by him. What had happened was there was a strike by NABIT, the National Association of Broadcast and Engineering Technicians, and Robert Geringer decided not to cross the picket lines in sympathy with the broadcast technicians, and they fired him because of that. Which is a shame because he really, really lent a lot of pathos to the role. He was the Dr. Kildare, as far as I was concerned. I kind of wonder why the other stars did not strike in sympathy, because there had been another strike a few months before with the newscasters, and everybody decided to walk off the job. And perhaps because of the delays that ensued, they probably read the Riot Act, but that's speculation. Okay, so Sharon Smith returns as Sarah Sharon Smith returns as Sarah in episode 331. She's a voiceover in episode 332, once again in 336. Anthony George, who is Burke, is in episode 333, 336, and 338. And by the way, we're going to be coming to that, but the Burke character is killed off in a later episode, and that is it for Anthony George for a while. He will come back, and we won't talk about when. Okay, Peter Turgeon is the replacement for Robert Geringer. Woodward number 3, Peter Turgeon passed away October 16th, 2000 in Stony Brook, New York. He was in the 1970 airport. And Peter Turgeon Dr. Woodward's character will be killed off in 341, but in a very interesting move, they kept Peter Turgeon on as Woodward's voiceover ghost, which you'll hear more about. The character of Dr. Fisher, who was the psychiatrist that David saw, was played by William Shust, and that was in episode 335. That was a one-time episode. William Shust was in the Adams Chronicles in 1976, and also in the very old Lamp Unto My Feet religious program on CBS back in the late 40s and early 50s. Peter Murphy now takes over the role as caretaker. The first caretaker, Daniel Keyes, is now out of the picture. I have no idea why, because Daniel Keyes was fantastic. Peter Murphy, in my view, gave no justice to the role. However, Peter Murphy was quite prolific. They liked him. and he came back on in various bit roles. In this block, he's a Blue Whale extra in episode 341. He's the Ghost of Woodward in episode 343. He's Burke's corpse in episode 346, which is under a shroud. He's Barnabas's aged hand in episode 347, and in 348 he's the back of Barnabas's aged head. So good for Peter Murphy. He made a lot of money during this block. Glamorous Blackburn, whom we haven't seen in a while as Mrs. Johnson, comes back in episode 339. David Ford is brought on for one episode in this block as Sam Evans. Really is a heavy. Okay, Sheriff Patterson is now played by Angus Carnes. Angus Carnes is the new Sheriff Patterson. I'm afraid that Dana Elcar is not going to be with us anymore. He makes two appearances in episode. Angus Carnes makes two appearances in episode 341 and 342. Angus Carnes died on October 14th in 2005, I believe, in New York City. And of course, now our Blue Whale extras. Bob O'Connell in episode 341 and 349, Catherine Quint, who you've seen before in 341, Tim Gordon in 341, and once again, Peter Murphy was a Blue Whale extra in 341. Okay, now we get to the bloopers. There are a lot of mic booms, and I'm not going to go into which episode they appear, but you're going to see a lot of shadows of mic booms, I should say, throughout this block. Please look for them. In episode 331, where David is attacked by the bat, and they do a reprise of that, you once again see the pole attached to the fake bat, the shadow of the pole attached to the fake bat, and you see a blurry camera. And in 334, a rare voice blooper by David Hennessy. He's talking about a male character, and he says she didn't do anything she was supposed to have done. And I think he's talking about Woodward, but the fans who were really sharp will take a look at that, see if they can prove me wrong. But anyway, he mixes up the gender. That's the thing. Really funny one in episode 335 when Burke calls Dr. Woodward, Peter Turgeon's Dr. Woodward, he calls him Dr. Hoffman. You can't say anything more about that. In episode 339, you see Sharon Smith looking at the teleprompter a lot. You've got a great blooper by Roger, who says, I would like you to look at my late sister's latest brainstorm. Well, Liz is very much alive. She's not his late sister. And actually what he meant to say is, I would like you to look at my sister's latest brainstorm. He put late in there. Also, there is a famous blooper in 339 where you see a camera pan. For some reason, I think they kind of lost it. You see a real pan that's all blurry. You see what looks like the teleprompter, and then you see and then it just swivels around, and you see a part of the backstage, and it's all blurry. One of the things also, which is really cute from the writer's standpoint, is Sheriff Patterson calling for. Who is in Dr. Woodward's office, which is supposed to be in the hospital, and he makes a phone call asking for the hospital. Okay. In episode 343, 345, I should say, that is, by the way, the episode where Burke is pronounced dead in absentia, having crashed in a plane in Brazil, and Liz is, and Joan Bennett's trying to remember where it was, which was Belém, and she says that place in Brazil, and then she says Belém. In 344, you're going to have a lot of coughing. Apparently, they couldn't stand Julia's secondhand smoke. In episode 346, in front of Vicky, Barnabas refers to Julia as doctor. That's really fun. And finally, in episode 346, also, you're going to see Julia in Josette's room while she's thinking out loud, and you see a stagehand in the upper left, in the left-hand corner. So that, everybody, is the roundup on what's happening during this episode block. And now let's get back to the show.
Welcome to the Collinsport News, and I am your host, Vicki Ray.
And I am Keith Shago, bringing you all the news from Collinsport, Maine.
And here we go. Although David is feeling threatened by Barnabas, Sarah gives him a toy soldier to protect him and warns him to leave the old house alone. Of course, David knows best and sneaks into the old house and makes his way to the basement, where there is a coffin with the lid open. Barnabas slams down the lid, and David screams out in fright.
David, escaping from the old house, runs into Burke and Dr. Woodward and urges them to search the old house. They both go to the old house to be greeted by Barnabas, who leads them to the coffinless basement. They leave, leaving Barnabas with a smirk on his face, thinking he got one up on them.
Meanwhile, Burke and Woodward tell Roger that they did not find anything, and Roger states that what they had expected to find. Ignoring Roger, they go and see David, who desperately wants to be believed. He then tells them there is a secret room in the Collins mausoleum up on Eagle Hill.
Dr. Woodward returns to the mausoleum for further investigations to find Sarah singing her #1 hit, London Bridges. Sarah gives cryptic clues, drawing Woodward to confront Barnabas, who makes his way to the old house. He eavesdrops on a conversation between Julia and Barnabas and hears about the experimentations. He also discovers that Julia has a notebook, and it is now his mission to find this secret notebook.
Meanwhile, Woodward finds the notebook and runs off with it. Barnabas and Julia decide it is time to destroy the notebook because it can implicate them into Barnabas's dirty deeds. They figure out Dr. Woodward has taken it, and it means curtains for our dear beloved Dr. Woodward.
Barnabas decides that Woodward must die, and Julia is going to help him. Julia is very upset of having to kill her friend, but when push comes to shove, and self-preservation prepares a hypodermic needle to kill her very long friendship with Woodward. The good doctor walks into a darkened room to come face to face with a dynamic duel.
He was offered a choice on how he wanted to die, and though fighting them off, I guess the hypodermic needle is the choice. I guess everlasting life as a vampire was not to be in the cards for the good Dr. Woodward.
Burke and Sam find out about Woodward's death and think it is a foul play, although the coroner stated that it was a pulmonary embolism. Burke and Sam leave it at that, and Julia becomes even more clingy to Barnabas. She starts to spy on Barnabas and Victoria, and it is only a matter of time before there is a bunny boiling on a stove.
Sarah appears to David, who seems to be in a stupor in his room, and warns that disaster is coming to Collinwood. David comes up with that about Burke as Burke is going to Brazil and gives him a somber goodbye. People are concerned about David's way of saying see you later, but as he goes back to his room, it seems that they are not concerned to follow him to see if he's okay. Burke kisses Victoria goodbye, and thankfully we see the back end of passive Burke.
The next day, Elizabeth is concerned about David and thinks he may need to be sent away for psychiatric help. As he knew about Woodward's death before anyone told him, and the sullen way he said goodbye, it seems that David is not quite dead. The telephone rings, and Burke's plane has gone down in the jungle. Is Burke dead, or has he become the 1960s version of Greystoke, Lord of the Apes? Could have been a spin-off, but I'm sure the monkeys would probably act passive Burke off the screen.
Victoria refuses to believe that Burke is dead, but Barnabas finds this a way to get close to Victoria, much to Julia's annoyance. Barnabas wants his treatment accelerated to take advantage of the distraught Victoria. Julia, through jealousy or concern, says that this is not a good idea, but relents and does as instructed.
Barnabas' new treatment seems to add a spring to his step. He wants to go to the tower and see the sun come up, and Julia advises that it's probably not a good idea, and for once he listens to her. He decides that he's now a bit randy for Victoria and is going to step up his pursuit of the governess who gets paid for not working.
Julia takes it upon herself to steal crystals from the chandelier and use them as a hypnotizing mechanism. She hypnotizes Victoria, and it takes her for a ghost walk to the basement of the old house to show her Barnabas's coffin boudoir. She then brings back Victoria to their starting point and snaps her awake. She is now apprehensive of Barnabas.
Julius goes back and with the accelerated treatment plan for Barnabas, continues on with the experiment. When finished, Julia screams in fright, either by the sight of Barnabas or what Barnabas is going to do to her. He has turned into an old man and his body and face are catching up to the years that he has been alive on the face of the earth. Maybe anybody know what the acceleration process here is? And what exactly does this mean? Is he like Benjamin Buttons in reverse?
Apparently, to stop the aging process, Barnabas must find a young victim, which pretty much leaves out the male cast, and Mrs. Johnson and Elizabeth Stoddard. Julia mentions Victoria eagerly, which Barnabas seems annoyed by this suggestion. Maggie is not mentioned. Joe would have been my choice. Yummy, but apparently that is a bit much for 1960s daytime television. Carolyn isn't mentioned, so we know where this is all going.
At around the same time, Carolyn seems to get closer to David than ever before, and David gives her his toy soldier to protect her. She starts to believe David and think there is a bit of truth to what he is saying and goes to investigate. Leaving the toy soldier behind, she goes to the old house and into the basement, where Julia catches her and tells her to get away, only to be caught by aging Barnabas on the stairs.
The next day, Carolyn is now slightly undead or partially alive, or Barnabas's bitch, which is not very clear, but we do know that she is under the spell of Barnabas. Carolyn, I guess, has less willpower than Maggie as she abides to do his bidding and is in a quest to win over Victoria's affection for the old man, literally, and discredit David.
Jealous Julia hypnotizes Victoria again and goes on a walkabout with her for only Carolyn to see them. Julia warns Victoria that Barnabas is trying to turn her into Josette. They return and snaps Victoria out of it. Carolyn queries Victoria and Julia, and their stories don't match, making things very suspicious to Carolyn, and decides that she is now Carolyn the Grass. And that is good night for me, Keyshago.
And for me, Vicky Ray, and this is your Collinsport News.
Hello, welcome back to Literary License Podcast. We're discussing Dark Shadows episode 331 to 352. And thank you, Story Geek, for all those fantastic choices. And we'll be downloading, sharing, and watching them during our week of lockdown. So, Tom, what are your thoughts of these episodes from 331 to 352?
Very interesting transitional block, I would put it. You have some two notable deaths.
Yes.
One is, well, first of all, Robert Geringer, who played Dr. Woodward. Robert Geringer's last episode, I think it's 341. The story there, and I outlined it in the blooper segment. Has to do with the fact that there was a National Broadcast Engineers and Technicians strike, NABIT, and Robert Geringer refused to cross the picket lines, and he was fired, and that's why he was taken over. It was taken over the next day by Peter Turgeon, who was the new Dr. Woodward, and he didn't last too long, and they killed him off. But he did stay on as the voiceover of Dr. Woodward's ghost, which is interesting because if you remember the Bill Malloy character back when we first started to do these episodes, they didn't give Bill Malloy a chance. The actor that played Bill Malloy, they didn't give him a chance to do that. He really wanted to. I think he did it once. He portrayed his ghost with the seaweed, but they didn't really do it in an ongoing
They say something. I liked the old Dr. Woodward, the first one, much better.
Yeah, I know.
I hated seeing him go.
Well, you talk about Geringer, the guy that played before, the older guy. The older guy. Yeah, well, I think he was too. Yeah, I think,
They both did a great job, but I get kind of partial. Yes.
I can see it. The first one was more of a traditional doctor type, and he was diagnostic. I just happen to like Geringer because of he just had this homey he had a great bedside manner, and he really displayed an interest with. He talked in one episode about Julia and Barnabas. We know what's going on, Julia. It wouldn't be such a terrible thing. And then that whole thing reversed itself with Peter Turgeon, who's disgusted with her that was really a plot. That was really a writer's change. Anyway, so that's one thing. And the other thing is Burke Devlin's death.
Yeah, Passive Burke. No, that's when we got Passive Burke.
Yeah.
I really hated seeing him, Mitchell Ryan, leave too.
Sure. No, Mitchell Ryan was great. Mitchell Ryan is great. Now Anthony George now is gone, and they go ahead and kill him off. He goes to South America on business, and he's in a plane crash. And one of the bloopers is when Joan Bennett is trying to remember where in Brazil, and she says, "That place in Brazil, Belém." But the bottom line was they needed to get rid of Burke because now they're establishing a new love triangle, and that's Barnabas, Julia, and Vicky. And so we got to get Burke out of the way so we can get Vicky more aligned to Barnabas, and Julia's interfering.
Vicky doesn't seem to be too broken up, though. I mean, she could have been just a little more convincing.
And it also happened pretty fast. There's a rule in soap operas, and I think Agnes Nixon, if somebody's going to die, let it hang for a week.
At least.
Yeah. And she gets a phone. So Liz gets the phone call the first few seconds of the episode, runs in. He's dead. And Mrs. Johnson ran in to tell Liz. And then Liz is blabbing it to everybody and whatever. That being said, there's also the development of the unrequited love that Julia feels for Barnabas, and I think that's interesting in terms of she's trying to give him hints, and he's saying, "Don't be ridiculous, I
know. Just talk about a slap in the face. I would have just. He's so shitty to her. He really is shitty to her. I mean, the character-wise, they're best friends off screen, but boy, what a turd. Just talk about unrequited love, and he just totally craps all over her. And, talk about crash and burn.
Now it's very interesting, Vicky, because here's the thing essentially that's happening with the character. And this is because Joe Caldwell, one of the writers, who kind of subbed whenever he was needed. He came on for a couple of weeks, and he then started reverting. He put his own thing into the mix. They were starting to develop the sympathetic vampire. But as you see, when Woodward was killed, all of a sudden Barnabas is reverting to a real sadistic bastard, and he's telling Julia to inject him with the fatal drug. And he's torturing the hell out of her because he knows that the two of them are friends, and he's asking her to kill her friend.
That's so cruel. He was
from medical school,
cruel.
Yeah. Oh, terribly. And he's clean, and he's literally grinning at the thought of it. Frid plays this great. He's literally grinning at the thought of it. The great line that Caldwell gives, which is one of my favorite lines, is that when Barnabas first appears to Woodward, and Woodward says, "This is a nightmare," and Frid says, "Think of it as a dream, one from which you will never awaken." Boy, does that send chills down your spine. I mean, that really did it for me.
Here you were telling me that Barnabas was going to get all softer, and I'm up to episode 470. He's not softer. Just saying.
Well, hang in, because actually in this block,
they do soften him. Actually,
yes, they do. Yes, they do. And actually, in this block, if you really look closely, while Caldwell was on, he really wanted to emphasize the vampiric nature, and there was a switch. Then, when Gordon Russell went back, Gordon Russell and Sprout, then Barnabas is now getting sympathetic again. And he's talking about, with the experiments. You see the lab for the first, with all the Frankensteinian things. And
right.
and adding the acid and all kind, and all kind, and comes off with these soliloquies about, I want to see the sunlight. I want to see, then I can have a normal relationship. Then I can be a normal man again. So even in this block, you see this switch. He's very labile.
Yes, but he thinks he's getting something, though. It's totally mercenary.
Exactly. Excellent. He's always manipulative. He always is. I think it's interesting, by the way, this is a very, very subtle thing. When Julia is trying to convince Barnabas not to kill Woodward, and
right.
Julia kind of says, if my experiments work, I can save both of you. Barnabas, if you have to, turn him into a vampire, and then I'll save both of you. And it's implied, but it's not really stated. It's a very, very subtle thing.
Right.
What an interesting concept there. And it's not something you really have to. But yeah, the bottom line is, but again, the Barnabas character is so paranoid. So one day he's in the East, and the next day he's in the West. So what the writers, what Caldwell did now versus what Russell and Sprout are doing later, even in this block, it's all in character. I understand, but anyway, it's interesting to see the development. You have some great lines of Roger. You have some great scenes between Roger and Liz. What is this, Liz? Are we turning Collinwood into a hotel? Why don't you just hang out a sign and let out all the rooms? Those are that's classic. That's really classic. So there's a lot of good stuff here.
Well, I'm going to add that basically I thought for anyone that actually knows what this show is showing, I thought there was a lot of nice precursors to show us what is to come. A bit like the toy soldier that Sarah gives to David, gives us a little bit of a clue of what's to come, which I thought was quite interesting. And I like the way that they actually were able to put together the relationship between Sarah and David. Now it just seems a bit more natural. It's not so. They've done a very good job of actually taking Sarah with her cryptic kind of talking to basically now she's able to string a couple sentences together to have like really good conversations between her and David. And I thought that was quite good.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I enjoyed the interaction between the children a lot. I'm glad that they finally kind of that activity kind of came to fruition finally, because she's a great little actress. They needed to elaborate more on that.
I got to say something nice about Peter Turgeon. I was not happy with his role, but with his interpretation. But of course, I was comparing it to Robert Geringer, and I was biased. But I'll be fair. And there were a couple of scenes that he really handled well, and one of them was his conversation with Sarah in the mausoleum. And it just gave me the impression he used to working with child actors, but he really flowed very, very well.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and also the last scene, when his death scene, he went out with a bang. He really did. Yeah. He was like, he knew that he was going to go somehow, and he was trying to see if he could get out of it to the last minute. And he actually had Barnabas fooled for a minute. Sarah's over there. Look, there's Sarah.
Yeah.
Barnabas is stupid enough to like, Sarah, where are you, Sarah?
I
know. For somebody who's
but it was funny.
It was. Well, how could somebody who's so smart be so dumb? But luckily, he was able to catch Woodward as he was running out the door.
Yeah. Look.
I also quite like what we're kind of getting a lot of. I have to sit there and say this is probably one of the strongest blocks that we've done at the moment. Where basically it's like I have to sit there and say this is probably the first block that basically my mind didn't wander in. My mind has a habit of tend to wander a little bit because I try to do 5 episodes a week. Work commitments and stuff like this. So normally it's like on a Saturday or Sunday morning, or sometimes in the bath. But
you tell me that all the time. I'm in the bathtub watching Dark Shadows. Okay.
And I find that sometimes my mind tends to wander. But I have to sit there and say that these blocks were very, very good because, obviously I'm quite familiar with the show up to a certain point, and I know what's coming. but I love the way that they're like, it's almost like this is the first time we've actually seen them jumble multiple storylines in a block. Normally what we get is like one storyline, and then for a certain block, and then they'll start another storyline, and then they may come back to another storyline or forget about it altogether.
Right.
Here, I feel like they've thrown everything up in the air, and they're jumbling storylines. So we're going back and forth, and every character's got something going on, which I find is very, very interesting. And it is a nod to what we used to in modern television storytelling, where we have multiple storylines going on at the same time, and at some time they will merge. And I love the way that they were able to jumble them in this block for the most part. We got, Burke and Woodward trying to figure out, David's telling the truth. We got the scared David up in the room. We got the Carolyn character who basically, feeling for David, but doesn't quite know, how they should feel. We got Victoria trying to piece together what's happened to Burke and her relationship with Burke, but how she feels about Barnabas. We got Barnabas interested in Victoria, but meanwhile, Barnabas needs to become a better human or become more human. We got Julia, with her experimentations, meanwhile with her feelings for Barnabas, and we got, all this stuff all tumbled together, and they're able to balance it very, very well without actually losing any threads for the first time. Because normally when they start, jumbling these storylines, they tend to drop off threads, where it's like we never hear about it again. But here they're keeping everything very tight at the same time, without running off.
It's interesting, Keith, what you're talking about. Usually they teach in school, you got the plot lines or ABC, or, in terms of 3 plots to a show. West Wing, actually, when it was on, did like 16 plot lines to a show. But I think that's the first time since Dark Shadows did it. Dark Shadows, I think, was ahead of its time in interweaving these multiple plot lines together. And I think that's what really got fans really kind of intrigued, because you had to start following. And it became a lot more interesting than just 1 or 2 standard plot lines. And so that's important.
And I also quite like. I mean, there's quite a lot to like in this block as well. I have to sit there and say that the basement for the first time has had more traffic in it than Grand Central Station. I will add that to the proceedings. Everyone at one point. I think there's only two members. Well, actually, I think Maggie, Joe, and Sam are kind of off in the evenings during these. We don't really see them. But as far as everyone at Collinswood, everyone went into that basement except for Elizabeth and Roger and Mrs. Johnson. They're the only 3 characters that didn't make their way to the basement at any given time. They're in this block. And Barnabas had a really good I love the way that he popped up behind the coffin lid with David, and then he like pops up on the stairs, when Carolyn's there. And I thought they were really very effectively done. They did some really effective lead up, and that teasing of the audience of will they get caught? Will they get caught? And then boom, they get caught, and you had that little bit of a jump. And I don't think that. Up until this point, I don't think Dark Shadows really had jump scares up until this point.
What did you think, by the way, that psychiatric explanation that the psychiatrist that they had on for one day offered? Remember, they got that was Dr. Fisher, and he talked to David, and then he came up with this thing about David's attraction to death. Because of his mother, versus Barnabas, that represented thanatophobia, the fear of death. You remember? Do you remember that little? I thought the whole thing I thought was ridiculous, except for the thanatophobia element. I mean, it was totally off. But the thanatophobia, the fear of death, and Barnabas is death itself, and David's afraid of him because of it. That was most on the mark. What did you think of that? Do you remember it, Keith?
Yeah, I do remember. Okay, I mean,
it was a brief.
Well, there's a lot of mojo going on in that speech that he gave, but at the end of the day, I got a feeling that the reason why they put the mojo in there basically is because I think they're using it as foreshadowing. And let's face it, I mean, a fear of death. I mean, Edgar Allan Poe probably wouldn't have his writing career without it. but I thought it was quite interesting because when we talk about fear of death, we do actually experience this in Dark Shadows previously with Elizabeth's daughter. Elizabeth's daughter had this fear of death. And of course, we're going to be revisiting this theme again later on in later episodes, of course. But we did have that whole fear of death. She went into a catatonic state. And then again with the Paul Stoddard character as well. So it's almost like, and I thought it was quite, so even though what he was saying didn't pertain to David, but it did pertain to kind of Dark Shadows as a whole. As you look at everything up to this moment, Dark Shadows is basically a show about the fear of death, really, or the fear of finality. So when you use it in the context of outside of David, but as a context of an analogy of the show itself, I thought it was very fitting.
And the attraction to death, if you look at it that way, that's a very interesting point, because if you look at it that way, and you're going to see that more later on, there's an attraction to death. And of course, there's this thing of Barnabas where everybody's going crazy, but Barnabas is not the only male vampire on the show. We're not going to talk about who is later on, but there are going to be female vampires on the show, and that is going to. I remember when I was a teenager, I was very interested in one or two of those, and the whole psychosexual element of vampirism. In terms of, I don't want to get into a convoluted, psychological conversation on that, but Dark Shadows does an excellent job of exploring that from either gender, and that dream that the psychologist interpreted, and you're right, the attraction to death is also in Dark Shadow, as well as the fear of death.
Well, another thing, I guess, David, all through the series that we've seen up until this point, his storyline is surrounded by death and being obsessed with death anyway. He was always obsessed with Josette, the ghost, and obsessed with the ghost on the old house, which is basically death. He always, and then of course we do get him when he says goodbye to Burke, and his solemn look, knowing that Burke's going to die, and the way that he reacts to that death. And of course, in this flock also, we have David basically surrounded by that he is going to die because of, he's come across the truth of Barnabas. And now, unfortunately, it seems like Barnabas has pushed David to the side and has his eye on other prizes after a while, because as soon as it seems like he's discredited, I think Barnabas kind of like, okay, I can leave David alone.
Well, I think it's a kind of thing that, he kept foaming at the mouth about how he might have to get rid of him and scaring the hell out of Julia. But I always got that impression that he really didn't want to do it unless he absolutely had to. That was part of the sympathetic vampire thing coming out of him. Whereas the traditional...
Is it a sympathetic vampire, or does it have to do with the family? Keeping the family?
I was just going to say that. I think it's both.
Because I'm sure if David was Maggie's little brother, there probably wouldn't have been no problem of dispensing him quite quickly.
Right.
Well, no. So they did not want to show. I'm sure Curtis did not want to show a little kid getting killed on the show, which in 1966 or 67 would. The censors would never have allowed it.
God, now ever since mid '90s, as the world turns for they shut down and all these other shows, it's just like they have no problem killing off kids now. General Hospital notorious for it.
Wow.
I have to sit there and say though that we are later on going to get the death of some kids later on during the show. So
right.
Yeah.
And of course, I don't think this is giving too much away, but Sarah's dead, isn't she? So.
But they're not.
Well, everybody knows about that one.
But she died of an illness, and we don't want to go too much into. Well, actually, that's talked about. When the caretaker, who's portrayed by the Peter Murphy. I so miss the first one.
God, I love that the guy from Eagle Hill.
Yeah.
The caretaker. I love that guy. Just like what happened to him. He's such a. I could never figure out if he's a specter or if he's actually a human because his clothes aren't totally antiquated, but they are. And, he just kind of pops up. Where the fuck does he come from? He just pops up, it's like, oh, here I am.
Well, I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened. Peter Murphy took his place. Peter Murphy played apparently in this block. He plays everything from Barnabas' hand, the back of Barnabas's head, to Burke's cadaver. He was boy. I mean, I've never seen so many bit parts from one actor in one block. But the first one he played was to replace the Daniel Keyes, the first caretaker, and he comes across horribly. I mean, that's my opinion, horrible. But what my point is that they're going through. He and Woodward are going through the history as all those books that caretaker has in his little house, some of which, by the way, are law journals. If you look very closely, they're not historical journals at all. They're appellate court decisions.
Well, to be honest, I'm surprised they didn't fill the bookshelves with Encyclopedia Britannica in the background.
That was next.
Well, to be honest, they probably did that time that Victoria was in the study with Willie was trying to accost her when Willie number one.
Oh God! But anyway, so they're going through this, and they talk about the fact that Sarah died from an illness, and that's a socially acceptable way. That's not a sexual thing. It's not a violent thing.
Right.
God took her, and so that they were able to do. I'm just talking about the violent deaths of kids. That's terrible, Vicky. I haven't been keeping up with the soap operas. That's terrible, Vicky, that they don't care how they kill them off now.
Well, they've sort of like babies die and get switched, and it's just sort of like this last before COVID, they had a baby switch, of course, the good old switcheroo with the babies. And the baby was born stillborn, so they bury that baby in the wrong grave while they keep the other baby and pass it off as their own, And it's just like, oh, God, that's so. We're so desensitized, I think, as a society sometimes. But I mean, it's the baby storyline.
The baby being switched storyline is kind of an old trope for soap operas.
Just added COVID onto it.
Yeah, died of COVID.
Mm-hmm. Now, I have to sit there and say that when Barnabas, when they find out that Dr. Woodward has stolen the notebook, after he basically is, earwigged what Barnabas and Julie have been up to, and he's put everything together, and he steals Julia's notebook, and of course we have, Barnabas and what you mentioned earlier, that great scene with Barnabas is tormenting Julia, saying that she has to go through with this because she is going to be just as guilty as he is, and that she's going to basically have to save herself by getting rid of Woodward as well, not just him. And I like the way that Julia is saying no, 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 and all of a sudden she produces a hypodermic needle, and you're like,
blue stuff, nonetheless. It's blue.
Just in case I got the hypodermic needle. I don't want to use it, but I got it. And I have to say, I had to smile at that a little bit. It's like, no, Barnabas, I don't want to do it. No.
Here it is.
Now here's the hypodermic needle.
Here it is.
But I thought, but what I did like about that, even though I found that okay, you don't want to do this, but you got something ready just in case. But I love that thing when they give Dr. Woodward a choice. How do you want to die?
Right.
And I thought that was very, very effective. You're like, oh, okay, this is actually more effective than if something happened, walked in and they attacked him.
Exactly.
But giving you the choice, how do you want to die? Do you want to do, by needle or by fang sort of thing? And I thought that was really well played.
And that's due to Joe Caldwell, who was writing at the time and had a new take on. He's a really very good writer, and he had a really good take on that. Incidentally, the autopsy was negative for any violent cause of death. But Keith, how did they explain the fact that he had an intramuscular injection in his arm? Did they ever try to?
Well, I mean, the thing is when it comes to intramuscular injections, at one point, and to be honest, and you pretty much can still get away with this, is that if you wanted to get rid of someone by, let's sit there and giving them an air bubble into their veins,
right?
An embolism.
Chances are is if the heart would stop, there'd be no blood and stuff like this, and the pinprick would be very, very small. It depends on the size of the needle, really, and most needles are quite small anyway.
Right.
So basically, there's no feedback. The only time, and if, another thing is, it's basically just, it's not going into. I mean, the way that she administered it, it was more an intramuscular, so I'm not quite sure how that would actually, it's a bit longer to kill you. The only time that you would basically would get a hole from anything, like it would be from an IV or something like that, because it goes into the vein and then the blood comes out of the hole. And then basically it's the blood that would close it. But otherwise, the skin kind of goes over the injection site.
Okay. I was going to say about the switching to the you have no friend. And that now is a theme that develops after Woodward's death. He comes back to haunt her, and he reminds her that you're alone, Julia.
But I was trying to figure out, was that Barnabas screwing with her head, or was it actually him?
No, that was actually, I thought it was actually Woodward.
I thought it was Woodward as well.
Yeah,
because you have to remember that when someone dies of the violent death in Dark Shadows, they do come back.
True.
Josette came back. Bill Malloy came back. That just seems to be a presence. So that's why I thought it was.
I thought,
and of course, later on, we are going to get more violent deaths where the people do come back for one or two cameos before they shuffle off the Dark Shadows land. So,
but it was a good way to keep Peter Turgeon on after he died, and this is something, and I allude to this also. When I'm talking about the blooper, they didn't do that for the Bill Malloy character, except for one spot where he came back with the seaweed, left seaweed all over the floor. But but again, so they learned that now, if a character's killed off, he doesn't necessarily have to stay dead on Dark Shadows. He comes back in various forms, and that was some extra. That was extra added. I just can't see how Robert Geringer, the way he played that, and then what they had Turgeon do, I can't see Robert Geringer changing like that into such a because that the caring, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe again it's a bias, but But do you think that Robert Geringer could have done justice to the way it just doesn't seem right? I don't know.
I think it probably would have been played slightly differently or something.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not saying that. I don't know if it'd be as effective, but I think it'd probably have a different effect, because the Dr. Woodward that died, the actor that we got for that Dr. Woodward, and the one previously had more of a home folksy. But I do think that if it was the previous Dr. Woodward and we had him doing the same scene and stuff like this, I have a feeling that with his death, what I would surmise that I think it would have been a lot more effective and a lot more chilling, because he had this weird calming bedside manner, and to find someone who is everyone's friend, to be like the person is like the friendly man next door who's always very, very kind and everything like this,
right? And
then to have his end being so, I mean, it's a disturbing end really for Woodward, disturbing for daytime television at the time, and to see that ending for him, I have a feeling it would have been played differently, but I think it would have been more effective. I think it would be a bit more. I think it would haunt you in your subconscious more, personally.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I can understand, because it's such a change, and you really feel pain. You really feel sorry for. I mean, with the Peter Turgeon character, they got to get rid of him. It's utilitarian. But for the Robert Geringer character, you really feel that there's a loss. There's a real loss.
And I have to sit there and say that when the Woodwards changed, when the actors changed, what we got kind, fantastic Dr. Woodward, who, basically was there through the sicknesses of the family, so on and so forth. Then when the change went over to another actor, we got the Detective Woodward, and so we kind of got a slightly different Woodward anyway. So it would have been, so that's why, like, when his death, it was kind of like the detective got caught, and he's not gonna live to tell the tale, sort of thing. So we got Detective Woodward versus Home Dr. Woodward. And it's kind of funny that when they did make that switch between the two Woodwards, it's during the switch in the storyline where Dr. Woodward is now the inspector, the detective doctor who's now getting to the bottom of everything. That's when the switch happened, which is kind of a bizarre way to switch the character out, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, what did you think of the aged Barnabas, old Barnabas, which Dick Smith did the makeup for that? Dick Smith went on to do the Dustin Hoffman
You look
makeup.
200 years old.
Yeah, well,
I have to sit there and say, though, unfortunately for Jesse, Vicky, and I, that when we got old Barnabas, we got to see old Barnabas after we'd done our show for Texas Chainsaw Massacre with Grandpa. So we were kind of a bit shaded when we got to see Barnabas. Though Jesse did say he did look like Barnabas, old man Barnabas.
Yeah.
He did, Grandpa.
Yeah, but saying that, I thought it was very, very clever that the way that they did it. That basically we got the scene ending and the episode ending with Julia looking around and screaming. So that way, when we did get Barnabas, we got Barnabas who could actually move his mouth and move his eyes and do facial expressions. So we got, instead of like Barnabas throwing a mask over him really quickly to give the bum 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 situation, we were able to get Barnabas in full makeup. And I imagine that. Yeah, the makeup that they use, it had to take 2 or 3 hours to get him in.
Absolutely. And interestingly enough, it's different from Dick Smith. Also did the makeup for Jonathan in the Dark Shadows movie, the first one, House of Dark Shadows.
Yeah, that you can tell.
You see the difference. Well, in the original Dark Shadows, he still had his hair. Right. He's bald in the House of Dark Shadows, and he looks a lot more monstrous in the House of Dark Shadows.
Yes, he does. He's disgusting.
He looks more like Nosferatu.
And then he goes after beautiful Maggie. It's even more disgusting.
You're right, Clete. You're right.
He was flicking his red tongue on her neck.
Yes. Bad visual.
You're welcome.
And of course, the best line out of that was when he attacks Carolyn and he says, "Don't worry, Carolyn, you are my cousin. You're my flesh and blood."
Poor Carolyn. She's so not expendable, but you just see.
I have to sit there and say that when Barnabas takes over Carolyn, we find this is the best work that Nancy Barrett has done into
very
this
much.
Point.
Oh, absolutely. I think this is when I really started to like her because I actually loved this whole sequence with her and David because they've never, ever been close, really. So it was actually kind of nice to see them kind of develop a closeness even before that. And then to see that kind of twisted and turned once Barnabas bit her. She actually believed David for once because she encountered Sarah in her bright yellow bedroom. It was ridiculously yellow, I guess, to match her golden hair. But I always liked that scene where she met Sarah and then she started to believe David. And then it was so satisfying because nobody ever believes David.
I know.
And when someone like Carolyn, who would be the first to doubt David, actually goes and does some investigating on her own.
And then she changes her mind.
It made the whole thing extra frustrating when Barnabas found her and bit her because you kind of wanted something good to come out of that because it was so satisfying to see her and David actually get along. And David, she was like the only person that really believed David and could have helped him, actually could have had some proof if she didn't get caught. So I thought that was my favorite.
And it's also, I think we have some very interesting, we have a snippet of Carolyn's childhood and we also have a snippet of Roger's childhood in this block. Carolyn's childhood was when she's talking to David and she talks about her imaginary friend Randy, with 9 years old.
Sorry, Randy means something totally different.
Yes, we know. Randy and Roger. And Roger also means something in Britain, doesn't it, Keith? It's a good Rogering. And we won't go any, but yes, Randy is what happens before Roger. So, that's one thing. The other thing is with Louis Edmonds, this is very good acting on Louis Edmonds' part when he talks about when he was a kid and he used to look at and the portraits used to scare him. looking up the portraits, and he wondered if they were going to move and so forth. And he's discussing that. And then at the end of this, but of course he's very, I don't believe anything. I don't believe David. I don't believe there's a supernatural element. But he remembers the feelings that he had when he was a kid. And towards the end of the scene, he's in the drawing room, and he looks up at the portrait in the drawing room, and you see the expression on his face as he's remembering what he felt when he was a kid, and he didn't know any better, supposedly, and he got that same reaction. He felt that same reaction that he had back then, and he's kind of, well, gee, I felt that way once.
But you would think that after the Phoenix storyline, there was some viability for people to believe in the supernatural.
I wish
all about
it.
But the thing is, going to the Phoenix storyline, I think that we discussed previously, I got a feeling that when it came to the Phoenix storyline, that whenever she did burn up, I think that basically everyone's memory was wiped, because it happened in our Arizona. Everyone in Arizona has heard about the fire and stuff like this, but then all of a sudden their memory started going.
That's true.
And
I never thought of it that way.
And so I think that when it came to the Phoenix storyline, I do think that the story, I think that their memory got swiped on. I might be giving a bit more credit than credit is due, because to be honest, we did get like the multiple Josette ghost storylines going on, where
right.
she would present herself, and then and then Victoria would see her, but then Victoria would say that she didn't see her, and so on and so forth, that we did get later on. But I do think that's changing of the writers and not keeping a very good series Bible. I think that had more down to that.
I actually think that's true, because I got that same impression when I watched the show for the first time. I think it was kind of implied, actually, while they were doing detective work and stuff. And I think they asked someone who was back in Arizona who knew her, and they didn't really remember, even though she said that, I think it was like her housekeeper or something. I don't really remember that. That was a while ago.
But it seemed like the memory. It seemed like the memory did get swiped. And because another thing is, and then you look at David as well, and it's just like, and then David's like there, but then at the end of the day, it's kind of like David's memory of his mom started fading as well.
Yeah, I think after
like within a
she
couple of 3
died,
episodes,
I think it was kind of forgotten, especially for David. I don't know about everyone else; it wasn't as obvious, but I do think David seemed to have forgotten that situation, especially. I don't know.
Maybe
I'm pretty
the
sure
writers forgot. Maybe the writers forgot to put it in them. Yeah.
That too.
Yeah, but I actually think I think it has more to do with the fading of once a Laura dies, people lose their memory of her, because she's going to be born again. Again, you know what I mean? She's going to be born again. So she's going to be.
That would actually be
people
very,
can remember the new one until the Phoenix, and she burns, and then they forget again.
That would be very convenient. Yeah.
Well, it would make sense. I mean, they do say that. I mean, the legend of the Phoenix is that when a Phoenix burns and reborn, the whole life is reborn, and the life that it once lived is forgotten. That's the legend of the Phoenix.
Makes sense.
So
I never looked at it that way, but good point.
So
by the way, one of the, and I'll credit darkshadowseveryday.com for this. They were joking about when they were joking about when Burke was killed, and now Vicky has a dream sequence about a wedding. I think I'm trying to remember exactly. Yeah, and they were joking about Burke showing up in tatters from his desert island experience, and I'm reminded of Vicky. Do you remember One Life to Live? When Joe Riley was killed, this was back in the 60s, when Joe Riley was killed or whatever, it wasn't Vicky's, and we have Vicky now, Vicky Lord. Yeah. Wasn't her next boyfriend's name Burke?
I don't remember, actually.
I think it was.
I know that Victoria Lord got married a couple times, so.
Yep. I think it was. I think the next boyfriend, and then it was a Steve, but I think a Burke was in there somewhere. And,
I think you're right.
And at the wedding to Burke, guess who shows up? Joe Riley. Riley shows up and
that's right. Oh my God, I better look that up.
Bust up the goddamn wedding. I remember it like it was yesterday.
And that's scary when guys know about One Life to Live.
See, I think what happened to Burke. I think he crashed in the jungle and he became Lord Greystoke.
Lord of Or he's part of the Green Inferno at this point.
That'd be great if he gets a phone call one night.
Double Holocaust, whichever.
Then she goes, "What did I ever see in him?"
I loved him.
The thing is, the plane goes down, but they never find the plane, have they yet? Not in this block.
Not in this part. I think they wait. No, they do. I think
Later.
they do find the plane in this section.
So it's okay.
Later, and his death is confirmed.
We get the phone call. I mean, I thought it was kind of strange that, which is kind of funny, but with Victoria's blue dress when she has she's wearing the gay rainbow flag collar. Just like, what's she wearing? I have to say that sometimes some of these outfits actually look better in black and white than they did in color. Sometimes you get a color and you're like, what are you wearing?
It was the 60s. I gotta admit they had a flair for color back then.
Did you notice that when Carolyn was going to the basement, that every room that she walked in, she was color coded with her dress matched the candles, it matched the walls. It's kind of like, whoa, they color coded Carolyn. Good for you.
Heather remembers of that sunflower crap. Remember the greens and the whatever the hell that was back then? The flower prints, you know?
See, I want them to go back now that we're in color. I would like them to go in the kitchen and see if they have an avocado green refrigerator.
I don't think you'll ever see the kitchen again.
You
I think they got rid of that kitchen after it went to.
Honestly, you haven't seen it for a while, have we?
No, you're not going to see it again. They got rid of it.
I've kind of forgotten all about it.
Kitchen is consigned to the early episodes of black and white, and people who have not seen any episodes below 210 don't even know that the kitchen exists. So
now I have to sit there and say though that it's great seeing this in color, but I have to sit there and say, but what fantastic for the viewer that they've lost 2 of the episodes, so we get black and white of evil Carolyn working for Barnabas, because that actually was more effective in black and white than it would have been if it was color.
Precisely.
I agree.
So,
And actually, over the course of the series, I believe 11 kinescopes, 11 of the masters were lost. And so you will see more in black and white, few and far between. But whenever you see those in black and white, you always get a great sense memory, I think, of how things were before it went to color. And I personally think that Dark Shadows had more of that old horror atmosphere when it was in black and white, which is positive for it. Remind me of the old Universal stuff and the haunted house and the whole bit, and that certainly added to it. Yeah, the color was great, and especially the psychedelic effects, which you start to see now in this block.
Oh, I know. I feel like I'm watching Yellow Submarine sometimes. They do the in and out shit, with the rotating kaleidoscope. Time.
Just waiting for Jeremy to show up. He's a real nowhere man.
Nowhere man. Yeah.
And the blue meanies coming up. Yay!
The blue meanies. I forgot about them. Oh my god.
It was homage to the 60s, and you're going to see a lot more of that. But you do have the when Julia hypnotizes Vicky. Yes, Julia hypnotizes Vicky.
Oh, with the crystal, she stole.
Yeah, what happened to the
crystal makes more sense.
That's because you're right, and that's because they wanted to do that psychedelic effect of the lights going in and out, and it was a lot easier to do that with a crystal than it would be with that old piece of shit that she had.
But then again, I don't think she could. I mean, I guess she wouldn't be able to use the medallion again, because then David called her out on it as well to the whole.
But this was with Vicky. But this is
but what I'm saying is that David.
Oh, you're right.
Got the medallion, and Vicky was there, so if she pulled out that medallion,
so she heard about it. Yeah,
I guess it would have been a bit circumspect.
I hadn't thought of that. That's smart. Yeah, and it was smart for the writers to realize that. And
it's also a good plan that basically, because the storyline that we got is Vicky's going to redo the West Wing, and her and Burke, this is where they're going to. I mean, it would have been interesting if Burke lived, and I could just imagine.
I know. I
Burke
think there's
living
a whole story.
And Mrs. Johnson now cleaning the West Wing as well as the East Wing. Great. Wonderful.
Land sakes.
Cooking meals at all times of the day.
But why the hell is Roger?
Spying for Burke, didn't she? She just kind of doesn't do that anymore.
Well, he's dead now, so she.
Well, I mean, but she just kind of stopped.
Yeah, but the storyline with Bill Malloy finished it up way before Laura Collins came on the scene.
Mm-hmm.
So,
True,
so
okay.
there's no reason. There's no reason for her to. Then, to be honest, she's now gainfully employed, isn't she? She was gainfully employed, and Collins made gainfully. We still don't know where her allegiance lies with the Collins family, though, because she doesn't really. She seems to be baffled about things going with her, but she's not really on their side. She's not with them or against them. She's kind of just her own being. She's an employee.
She's in her own orbit.
I mean, I think later on when we do get a little bit more of her, I think we do feel a bit more enmeshed in the Collins family, but she's still considered the employee. She's not like Victoria, where like Victoria's kind of like working for them, but she's part of the family. Mm-hmm. Julia's, Mrs. Johnson's basically just the cleaner, cook, or whatever she is.
I think they try to do that with the whole, not to mention Tim Burton, but with the Tim Burton Dark Shadows, it does seem like they tried to implement her more as part of like a dysfunctional family member. They just wanted everyone to be dysfunctional in that. So I guess that was the whole point. But she even had an office like in the basement, I guess, which was kind of actually weird that she has like a doctor's office rather than like, a chemical alchemy setup going on from like an old, I don't know, horror film scientist. But
you talking about Julia, Jesse?
We're talking about Mrs. Johnson. How Mrs. Johnson's not really a part of the family.
Oh, my bad. Why did I think Julia?
Julia.
Well, Julia's living there too.
Yeah, Julia's living there too. But then I have to sit there and say that's kind of. That does feel like taking a square peg and trying to hammer it into a round hole, having Julia live there. Because the thing is, like, okay, I'm here investigating the family, but, there hasn't been a lot of typing coming out of her room at all. If she's writing a book, it's just like, well, and she spends all her time with Barnabas sort of thing. And it's kind of like, well, what's, and no one seems to question that,
But they all get confused. I mean, those bloopers where what's his name? Where Burke is talking with Woodward and he calls him Dr. Hoffman, and Vicky is and when Vicky is in the old house and Julia's there and she's still wearing her lab coat.
Yeah.
And how the heck did they explain that?
Well,
why the hell is she wearing a lab coat if she's a doctor?
Dr. Woodward did call Julia on her feelings for Barnabas too, if you remember correctly. I think that was in this.
Yeah,
that was entertaining. But didn't she also like kind of submit to the idea, even though she would have denied it? She did it because it helped her cause to make a bit more sense to him. Because the latter would be a little bit more, would leave more questions and red flags maybe.
Well, another thing is Julia is kind of an old maid, really. She's just an old maid, never been married, no boyfriend, and
but hair
to be
doesn't
honest. Well, I mean, to be honest, her hairstyle that she does have is very, very fitting for that scene. I mean, if you watch some of the films that came out at this time, and you would have a rich, educated woman, they would have this hairstyle. You found the mother in Harold the Maude had that hairstyle. Mm-hmm. The aristocratic mother in the musical Hair had that hairstyle. So. Even though it's a horrible hairstyle, and I do agree to it, but it seemed to be something that if you're aristocratic and rich or upper middle class to rich, you had that hairstyle, and that means that it was some kind of royalty kind of hair. Movies at that time would have these women in these kind of strong roles had that hairstyle, and which I don't understand it.
And at least on one episode, she's wearing a tan suit. Which is a nice change from the puke green and piss yellow stuff.
Those colors back then. God loved the 60s.
God almighty, it was so garish. The green, it just didn't look good on her. Maybe on somebody else, but it didn't look good on Grayson Hall. They once had her in the prior block wearing blue. She looked a lot better then.
But I have to sit there and say that sometimes her clothes fit better than some of the ones that are fitting the other ones. You know what I mean? Because she has that. Because if you ever notice, she does have that look that a lot of women had from the mid '60s to like 1976. With the the skirt and the top. What were they called? I want to say Liz Claiborne, but they weren't Chanel suits. They're like a copy of the Chanel suit, the women's suits, aren't they? That's the way they used to dress. So I think they got it right. But there are times that, I mean, like Elizabeth Stoddard's clothing, and you're thinking, and even though they're wearing bras underneath them, sometimes it's like some of the bras that they're wearing out there are obviously, like, you can see where the stitching of the bra is and everything kind of hangs off them very loosely.
Those were horrible bras back then. God, those are wretched. And they still sell those things at JCPenney's. Why any woman want to put that on, I don't know. But
I mean, if you look at some of the stuff that, like, they got Joan Bennett in, or Carolyn in, or Victoria in, some of those dresses, they're like cloth sacks. Like it makes them look like they have no body. They had like one boob to the right, one boob to the left, and they got the sack on. And you're kind of thinking, oh.
Clearly, back then it was the itty bitty titty committee was in vogue, opposed to the itty bitty titty committee. Yeah. Because you see, everybody's really kind of twiggy-ish back then.
Yep.
Now everybody's got, bet you can't size, It's like,
well, I think, but it's almost, but to be honest, it's kind of, for a family that's supposed to be, I mean, okay, I can understand Victoria, but for Carolyn and Mrs. Stoddard, they look like sometimes they're wearing off the rack clothing. It's just off the rack and they put it on instead of ones that have been tailored to them.
Yeah, exactly.
And as they're saying that, even though the color palette that Julia wears, at least her clothes fit her the best.
Clothes by
Elizabeth does have some of the best clothes though. Like she has a couple like really nice dresses that they should have just stuck her in all the time. Like in the very first episode, she had that amazing like black evening gown that was very like Morticia. And then she also has like two different, actually, I don't know. One of them's not velvet. It's more like a brocade kind of a thing. But then one's velvet and it has like the two buttons. Like those dresses are cool. And those are some of the best outfits that any of the characters have, like in the entire show, aside from like maybe the 1795 storyline. Because I don't think anyone else has outfits that are like that cool. I think maybe Roger's outfits, maybe his suits get kind of cooler, like when they get into the 70s.
Tailored. He seems tailored.
He has tailored.
Cool. Definitely.
Joe's clothes are tailored. Maggie's clothes. There are times that she's wearing that. She's wearing that Afghan as a skirt.
Oh my God!
She wore a horrible dress when she had that scene with Sam. That long granny dress.
I don't know. That was.
God.
And the nightgowns are ugly too. There's nothing even attractive about the nightgowns.
Well, I think that's the reason why none of them ever go to bed. There's no way they can sleep in those nightgowns. They'd be like, all that fabric.
Can't take it off.
Nancy Barrett, they dressed her kind of, I think, a little more. She was like a little sex kitten back for the day, though. She was pretty. She was cute. She was idealistic for the.
She didn't have any go-go boots, though. I would think that she'd have at least.
She did wear some go-go boots. I saw her. She had a couple pairs.
I think what you'll find is after the 1795 storyline, I think that they started spending more money on costumes.
Yeah,
they start spending more money on that. But I think at this point, the ratings are still like going up and up and up. So they're starting to get more money. So I think we do get to see a chance. Because I have to also say that the women wear the most ugliest shoes in the face.
Oh my God! And then we have the hair bows. I have to say, I've got to be with Keith. What is with the fucking hair bows? Just like, I remember the yarn though. As a little girl, I remember my mom tying my hair back with the yarn. So I get that.
But it looks more like she's 12 years old. Like she looks younger than Sarah with the bows in her hair.
Well, the problem with some of the bows is that they do look like that they went to the gift wrapping store at Sears and goes, "Can I have some of the Christmas bows?" And they just put them on their head because they just look like Sears gift bows. That's what I always thought.
Well, yeah, like mostly for Elizabeth. Elizabeth's are the ones that are really big.
Well, they used to have
her already like mammoth hair.
Those I think the ribbon. Catherine Lee Scott said they had to hold those hair pieces in too.
Yeah, I think that's what the bows are for, wasn't it? The ribbon, basically, so you wouldn't see.
Well, I always wondered what Alexandra Moltke did because there's like, especially in the first episode, like me and my mom have always made fun of her hair because there is so much of it, and it's like different lengths and in certain parts of it. So I don't know why there was so much sometimes. Maybe she has like naturally.
It was a hair.
Also.
It was a fall. Women in those days wore falls. So basically what they they would have their hair here, and then they would put the fall from like the middle of their head, and then the fall would, and then the comb would go in at a slant, and then the hair would fall to the back, and that's how they put them in.
That must be why a lot of old ladies have like bald spots, because that you'd think that would pull on the hair follicles.
Weaves will give you bald spots after a while. It just pulls.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and weaves are really bad for your hair as well. That causes a lot of baldness now.
Because a lot of the times they have like, it's almost like a glue, like a really kind of fine glue that sticks in there really well. So I can imagine that it would be, especially when you take them out every so often. Like when you're doing that, a lot of the time you're going to get bald spots after a while. The hair doesn't grow back after.
Ponytails give you headaches and stuff.
I can imagine. By the way, and this is really trivia, but I don't know why, but it seems like they fired Ed Blaney, who was the announcer, because in this block, if you listen to the end of the credits, you've got Grayson Hall and Alexandra Mulkey saying, "This is a dark shadow. This is a Dane Curtis."
That's true. I didn't even think of that.
And I'm like, wow, I didn't even realize until I listened, because now when I do this stuff, I listen to the credits all the way to see what I can pick up, and right at the end, and so they probably didn't want to pay him, and they already had these actresses online. So if they did the intro to the show, then they also did the Dan Curtis production end.
Well, eventually they do have the other actors narrating, the other female actors narrating.
There's a lot more Julia at the moment now, as noticed.
Right.
There's
a little Vicky. There's a little Vicky, but there's a lot more Julia. And you do see here Joan Bennett munch one or two lines, like she's reading the New York Times. And it's not one of her better moments, but you still see that. I wanted to also mention. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Keith. You were going to say?
Did we ever get Roger doing it? I don't think we do we?
No.
Ever?
Later.
I've not heard him yet.
Did we get him later?
Later.
Oh, I can't wait for that. Just the way
I get the 400s, and I have not heard him do it yet.
Well, no, he's not going to do it. If he does do it at all, so I don't know. I just have this vague memory, but it's not going to be for a long time. I wanted to mention, by the way, also in this block, that this is the first. They're also. Barnabas finally admits to Julia after bullying her and pretending that she's dirt and all this, looks into the camera and says, "I'm frightened." And he does that in episode 332. And you really, and this is really one of the first times that the man is actually communicating his fear. Which he hides, his anxiety, which he hides all the time, because he's too busy. I mean, and the crazy thing about it is the earlier that scene he was choking her.
He's always choking Julia.
How did you betray me today? It's a day of the.
Well, they both have a really passive aggressive relationship with each other anyway. It's an odd relationship. I mean, it's kind of like they have this kinship that they're very, very close, but then you got Julia's jealousy boiler stuff going on with Victoria. So you think it's only a matter of time before the pets start being boiled in the kitchen because she's getting jealous. But then she's like helping Barnabas, even though Barnabas is threatening her, but she can't keep away from Barnabas. So he's always pulling her in, and she's coming there. But then Barnabas gets worried about Julia if something happens, and Julia is on site all the time. So it's just kind of this weird relationship. I mean, even let's sit there and say that in an ideal world that these two should come together as a couple. Mm-hmm. I mean, basically, I think they just beat the shit out of each other.
Well,
because there's like weird. There's kind of a weird thing with these two.
If the dynamic stays the same, because I think it might change later on.
Yeah.
Well, no, I mean they're never going to be lovers on the show.
No.
But they are going to become good friends.
Well, they do become Watson.
Might as well.
They do become very good friends, and in fact Barnabas admits that to her, and moving on to the Lara Parker books, which she wrote 4 of them. And, of course, every fan's wish fulfillment of Julia marrying Barnabas was realized in the fan books. But there's other stuff that happens there. But there's no doubt that one of the things that kept the show together during that period of time was that all the fans really wanted to see Julia and Barnabas get together rather than Barnabas and Vicky.
But Barnabas had a thing for younger women, let's face it. Julie is the kind of woman that basically, is that thing that you date all these younger women, and then when you feel like you need to settle down, then you go for, it's a bit like I love these new pair of shoes. They're fantastic. These Prada shoes, they look great. They look great. They look great. And then it's like, okay, I'm sick of looking great. I want to put on my slippers, and that's Julia.
She's really an attractive woman. Though if you really look at her, especially in color, she's got beautiful skin. She's always, well done up. There's just something about her that's very charming, and I really guess I can't put my finger on it. But
Julie is someone that you would date because of her mind, not because of her looks.
That's right.
She's a sadder but wiser girl.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, I think it's a great scene when she talks about the fact that in medical school she was ignored because she was a woman, and
she probably would be. I mean, how old is Julie supposed to be?
In her 40s.
So that basically means she went to middle school
in the 40s. In the 40s, because we're doing it in 1967. So probably she went to medical school around 1946, 47, when a lot of women were not getting accepted into medical school, and but there were a few. There were a couple.
She definitely seems like the one exception. She has a quality that's totally convincing, especially for that time.
Well, I mean, let's face it. I mean, this woman, when she went to medical school, she got a PhD in psychiatry, chemistry, biochemistry. She got medical, general medicine. She probably got rheumatological and cardiology as well. I mean, this woman got every medical degree.
Remember, Keith, according to the professional misconduct laws, she can practice beyond the scope as long as she doesn't make mistakes. Yeah. So let her delve into all this. Although with what she did with Barnabas and everything, that could definitely go up before a medical board and she get their license revoked. I would have loved to have investigated that case.
I want to know where Julia got this equipment from. I mean, did she go to
Dr.
Hollywood?
Frankenstein's lab.
I think she went to Hollywood and raped Universal.
I like the electronic gizmo thing.
Well,
the thing going up, the traveling electrical current. I love that.
I know what you're talking about.
Well, I think that's why it lent itself to like a lot of the old original horror from old Hollywood.
Straight out of Frankenstein.
Absolutely.
And they will use this over and over. This chemistry set.
Yeah, it definitely comes in handy during the Dr. Lang story. I'm surprised they didn't do that more.
That's later for those fans. That's much later for the new fans.
I feel like Dr. Lang worked in like he didn't feel like he worked in a doctor's office. It felt like he worked more in like an office or like the what do you call it? Like the billiard room, and Adam was like on the fancy billiard table. Like it didn't ever feel like he was working in a professional doctor's lab.
Back then, doctors actually made house calls and came to your house. You know,
they did.
And we're talking about a year later, but he did work out of his house, which is interesting because in this block, there's some question. Woodard is. Where is Woodard's office? Well, it was established earlier that it was in the hospital.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, but then at one point it's in his house because when they find Maggie, they go to Woodward's house
later. So there's a discrepancy there, and but at this point it's in the hospital, and the sheriff Angus Carnes puts in a call, "Get me the hospital." Which makes you think that Woodard has a private office. So that part was.
But when they found Maggie wandering around in the cemetery and they brought her back home, and then Burke went to speak to Woodward, didn't they go to his house or something as well? That looked like a doctor's office.
Yeah, it's all screwed up. You don't know. But then you also have Woodard's placard on the door. Would he have a placard on the door if he had his office in his house?
He might do, I guess. I mean, the thing is I know that if I did private work, I would have an,
It's
like
possible.
I'd sit there and say if I did psychiatry in my home, I probably would have an office and like a
to keep it feeling professional.
And I might do that simple thing that so I might do that, and then I would have my office in the hospital, which I do now. And if I did, and let's say I did private work in another hospital, then I would have another office there as well. So I guess it is possible.
I would too, and I would get rid of the medallion, and instead I would have like one of those triangular things that wags back and forth to hypnotize people.
Doesn't
it? Yeah, I would have one of those instead, because that seems like it would be more convincing, and it's more aesthetically.
Or the little ball things they hit back and forth.
Something, yeah. The medallion is a bit much. It's like, no one's going to want to look at that piece of crap for more than 5 minutes.
Really bad piece of costume jewelry.
It does look like something that your grandchildren make you to put on your Christmas tree.
Well, it might as well have been like a macrame thing or a Christmas ornament, or there was almost something Native American looking about its design too, because I've seen some people with like the diamond shaped center, like kind of like in a dream catcher almost. I don't know. That's kind of what it reminded me of sometimes.
Yeah, it does kind of.
Or thrift store jewelry. It literally looks like thrift store jewelry.
I think what happened was that David Hennessy and Sharon were probably like being a bit naughty behind the scenes, and Dan or whoever was behind the scenes goes, "Excuse me, can you? I tell you what, we need a medallion. You should go to work on that and keep yourselves quiet for a while we go over here and film." And I was like, "Okay."
Well, I have the box from Collinwood that has.
It looks very similar.
Hand in it.
It looks very similar, and that's the one upstairs. And you'll see that used in other. Other time blocks later on.
I want the music box. I want Josette's music box.
Don't have that
anywhere.
You can actually buy that. That's not.
I had
one. I've looked actually.
I had one of the originals and it broke.
They used to sell it with the VHS thing from back in
They did come up with a remake in the 90s when they had the remake on. They had a new Josette's music box for that point, but it was always in a different key than the original that Robert Cobert developed. They even actually, this goes much later. There's Angelique had a song named after her called "Ode to Angelique." And,
that's right.
And somebody has an Angelique music box.
What?
A piano. Unbelievable. On YouTube, I saw it on YouTube. I said, "Jesus, I got to get that." And they were saying that's not available. But they actually had like a little piano, and it was an Ode to Angelique, and it played out the Ode to Angelique. So fans, stay tuned for that one. But that's really incredible.
So I also think that what we also have in this block, which is quite interesting, is that outside of Carolyn, I have to sit there and say that I found it really weird that once Barnabas went old, and then they were looking at that basically Barnabas needs some young blood, and then of course he turned. Julie goes, "Victoria, take Victoria. We'll get rid of Victoria," and of course Barnabas doesn't go for that, but they don't really give us a lot of reasoning about who they would go for, because they're not going to go after Maggie, of course. Carolyn doesn't come up in the picture, which obviously Carolyn ends up becoming the perfect remedy for Barnabas.
Why not go back to farm animals? That's what he was doing, in the beginning.
Sheep.
And I had to sit there and say, I could go to Joe. I guess Joe's a strapping young thing as well, but they can't do that because it's 60s. So
ooh, I sense a crush.
But yeah, it was kind of weird that that they kind of like, we need to find a younger victim, but they couldn't really come up with anyone, could they? Sort of thing. So
I really don't know why they needed to do that. I feel like in a modern show, they could have just found any random person. I don't know. It's not. I don't think it would be that difficult to find someone and not get caught right away.
They did in the movie. They did in the House of Dark Shadows movie. That was Daphne, portrayed by an actress who's on later. Lisa Richards. But you're right. And maybe they just wanted to focus on, the immediate.
Well,
cast.
yeah, and you also have, you got to be careful because when you have your extras, if they speak a line, you have to pay them extra.
Right.
So,
that's true. That's true.
And that means that's even if they scream. If an actor screams, that's lending their voice. So that means you have to pay them extra. Right. So maybe it could be done that. I mean, the thing is, we do have quite a very singular cast sort of thing. So it's very, eventually we do see this cast start exploding and expanding. But at this point, that has yet to happen.
Vicky, how do you feel about Burke's death? Because I know you like it.
When I first saw these back in the day and stuff, I kind of thought that he wasn't going to be dead, really, because no one really ever dies on a series. I mean, they resurrect miraculously several times.
Most of them.
And but the part I was really disappointed because I really loved Mitchell Ryan as Burke. He was the quintessential Burke. I mean, he was a badass. He was really masculine. And then how Keith always calls the new Burke Pastor Burke, because it wasn't like that role was even written for that actor. It was written for Mitchell Ryan.
That's right.
But I really hated seeing him go. I mean, I was like, no, because he's a smart ass and he's always up people's butt cracks.
He was a linchpin. The character was a linchpin.
I just loved him. I loved his character.
Well, he is the first of the original cast to go, isn't he? Really?
Mm-hmm.
True. I guess I'm partial. But then, was it?
Outside of what's his name?
He comes in, but he's got likable qualities. But I liked him better, and I know we're not getting into it, as Jeremiah, as opposed to.
Agreed.
Later.
Yeah, I think that's the case with
episodes, which everybody will come to see.
I think most people feel that way too. Maybe I'm not sure about that one, but I know it
just wasn't written for him.
No.
That's right. That's right. But I'm glad they gave him I'm glad they gave Anthony George another chance.
I give him another chance. It's sort of like you just got to acclimate. You always hate to see your favorite people leave, but then you have to find another reason to love the new one because you don't want to give up. It's like, there's got to be something about this person.
Well, I was glad personally that that the character died because I didn't like him as Burke. I didn't dislike the actor. I just didn't like him as Burke.
I would have loved Burke
because I really liked him as. Yeah, I really liked him.
Mitchell Ryan is a vampire. Badassery.
Yeah, but the thing is, I have a theory here. I think that once Mitchell Ryan left for whatever for the reasons why he left,
whatever reason.
I think at that point they said we're going to get rid of this character.
Probably.
But what we got to do is we got some things that we got things that we need to finish up. So therefore, what we're going to do is we're going to finish them up with a new casting, and then we're going to get rid of him.
Yeah. Well, they might have also.
I think what happened is that when we get into the next block, the next in August and September, when we get into that, and we're going to see this actor come back again. I think that was like, well, obviously, I think we did a disservice for you. So basically, we're going to bring you back and give you something there.
Maybe that's why they did it.
Because the thing is, if they were going to keep the character of Burke, what they would have done the same thing that they've done with Willie and what they've done with other characters who have taken over a role. Same thing with Sam Evans and other characters like that. And what they would do is they would write to that character's strengths, and then that character would have changed. That character would have evolved.
Mm-hmm.
They did a really good job with characters like Sam and Willie, because you almost forget that someone else played them at some point because they do such a good job, and then they take it an extra mile in like the best way possible. But with Burke, that just wasn't the case, sadly.
Well, yeah, but the funny thing about Burke is that with the Sam character and with the Willie character is that they did this overnight. It was like snap, new character. It's like this person's like a whole new personality. Where Burke, it would have made sense to bring him back with a new personality because we haven't seen him for a period of time, and it's like all that old garbage with about the car accident and the I'm going to take over the Collins fishery and that whole stuff is all settled, and that all got settled. It's like, and basically, so we could have dealt with a kinder, more nurturing Burke, but and they could have done that very easily, but they didn't. So it's almost like Mitchell Ryan's gone, so what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of Burke because we're not going to invest any time in this character. We just need to sit there and tie up some storylines, and out he goes. And that's what it felt like.
By the way, I do want to mention that in this block, Barnabas first gives an origin story of Jeremiah and Josette. And this is not the version that you were going to see later in August and September when the cast, I might as well say it, actually goes back in time to 1795, which is a treat. But in this block, he claims that he met that Jeremiah had married Josette and brought her to Collinwood, and that Barnabas was involved in stealing Josette away from Jeremiah.
Oh, how creepy, though. That makes his character seem extra creepy.
Well, yeah. I think they were trying to.
The thing is, though,
they changed it completely.
In the next couple episodes that we do, I have a theory based on all this history that we got at the moment and the way it changes, and I'll let you know what my theory is.
Okay.
But I won't say anything now because we're not there yet. But I do have a theory of the reason why the history is different from what we see and what we have for and then what Barnabas is telling us.
It was actually, though, a little closer to Art Wallace. The original thing was a little closer to Art Wallace with Shadows on the Wall, and where he describes the original Josette and Jeremiah and Josette had contretemps, which led to Josette's killing herself. And again, that was I think the writers were trying to figure. I think that the writers, in my opinion, the writers were trying to figure it out. And this is the provisional history that they came up with, which was. But I just want to let the fans know that's changed later.
So I think this brings us to the end of our Shedding Some Light episodes where we discuss the episodes. And this now brings us to character breaks. We are now going to discuss our favorite character, our least favorite character, and the reasons why for this. And of course, we will start with Vicky Ray. Who is your favorite character and your least favorite character of the blocks of Dark Shadows from episodes 331 to 352?
Okay, I'd have to say my least favorite character would have to be... God, I don't have a least favorite character in this block. If I had to pick one... Oh, God, that's painful. It's not Carolyn for sure, because she'd be my favorite character in this block because I always like when Carolyn, they let her they write better for her, I guess is the word I'm going to use. Yeah. And her character comes to fruition and to life and in more color. I think she's a great little actress in a lot of these episodes. And in the beginning, it was kind of stale almost because, everything was evolving.
Well, that's what I said. She totally grew into her character.
Yeah, she did.
Probably
she's
one
totally
of the best.
nailing it by now.
Absolutely.
And she is. And as far as probably my least favorite character, and I hate to say this, is because Louis Edmonds is not really getting as much as he needs to get in these episodes. He almost kind of seems like a byproduct because, I hate to say it all the time. People are going to send me hateful mail. But Barnabas does suck all the oxygen out of the room when he comes in. It's all about Barnabas. And you see some of these characters fall by the wayside just a little bit. And then you kind of see that ramping up still in the later episodes. I mean, I'm not trying to, it's not partial, but I really just love Louis Edmonds. I just wanted to see him, think of all the beginning, all of his one-liners, just whoever was writing for him, just popping that stuff off. He's just so comedic and so serious at the same time. I think he's a brilliant actor.
It's like he has dark humor for sure.
He's got I love dark humor, as we all know, and that's why I like Keith, because he's dark as well. But, he is.
The darkest.
But I would have to say, I just hate to see him phasing out a little bit in these episodes. I would have to say, it's a toss-up for my favorite character between Carolyn and Dr. Woodward because he really did leave with the shebang. It's kind of hard to dislike anybody in this block of episodes.
It's true.
It's just, they all were so strong. They all came in strong in this.
And what about yourself, Jesse? Your favorite and your least favorite?
Okay, so yeah, Carolyn is definitely my favorite. I think this is the episode where I realized how much that I actually like Nancy Barrett as Carolyn.
Yeah.
She's so versatile. She really is. And like I said in previous podcasts, is that I really do feel like she grew into the show. And here it's like so obvious, and it was so satisfying to see her, kind of helping David, because they've never had a good relationship in the show.
David really did good. The kids did excellent.
Oh, absolutely. I've been watching shows like The Strain and whatever, and kid actors are like hit or miss. Like most of the time they're not the best actors. And if they do, they're the same kid you see in like everything because they're so good, but you don't always get a good kid actor. And they were really good, considering that this wasn't like, a big mainstream movie or whatever. They were really good. The kids are always really good. And it doesn't matter if they struggle with their lines. It's so natural because naturally people forget and flub their words. So they do it so professionally, it just seems like a normal human thing. So I've never really noticed or laughed or thought it ruined it when they would flub their scripts or whatever, even just the slightest bit, because they always caught themselves and they did such a good job with it. As for like a character I dislike, I don't think that I have one really.
Hard to pick one in this episode.
Everyone does such a good job. Everybody has something to do. And that's what's cool, is that it feeds the dynamic, it feeds the plot, and it's difficult to even pinpoint.
Julia's really strong too in this.
Oh, I know. I know, even though you kind of like, you feel like you should technically dislike her just because she's like being selfish in this situation. Yeah. But it's so entertaining and it feeds the plot and it makes it more personal for her, rather, because you wonder like sometimes why she puts up with the crap, but then it's kind of insinuated that she does kind of have a thing for Barnabas in a way, or even if she's just getting attached to the work itself, him being a vampire, or whether she's feeling more romantically involved.
Well, he's got her by the nads after they kill the good dog.
No, he's got her by the neck. always by the neck. Yeah.
What about yourself, Tom?
Okay. Well, I definitely have somebody that I don't like in terms of the worst, and that is Peter Murphy, who, as the caretaker, was so good when you compare him to Daniel Keyes, and just like very, very flat performance. And he was just there for day work. He got a lot of day work, made a lot of money on that. But it's a toss-up between him and, well, I wasn't crazy about Peter Turgeon's performance either. I would put it as a tie, although Peter Turgeon did come up with 2 solid scenes, and I give him credit for that. But now as far as the best, well, sayonara, Robert Geringer. Great performance as Woodard. Maybe he was cutesy poo, but he gave a humanity to the. It was a balance because they were all so nutty so neurotic on Shadows. And here comes the balance with Robert Geringer's Dr. Woodward, who is sympathetic, caring, empathetic, really tries to do his job. That Dr. Woodward cares about Julia, whereas Turgeon's Dr. Woodward is so disgusted with her, he wants to throw her to the wolves. But so Geringer would be my nomination for best.
And as far for my favorite, now the thing is, if it wasn't for the last 3 to 4 episodes that we have in this block, I would have sit there and said Barnabas and Julia hands down because of the interplay and the tension and everything that they brought to it.
As far as your favorite character?
Unfortunately, for this block, yeah.
Okay.
Only because I love the tension between them and the playfulness and the evilness and this this game of chess that they have amongst each other. And I thought they played it brilliantly. And then of course there was the Julia jealousy. But then the last 3 episodes came up, and then we saw the Carolyn change. And for me, when I saw Carolyn become Barnabas's bitch or Barnabas's puppet, and then all of a sudden, like, she walks up on the screen, her head's tilted differently, her eyes are acting differently, and her whole body movements have changed from what we've seen of Carolyn at that time, and even the way that she delivered her lines. So that right then and there is like my eyes were stuck on Carolyn.
Exactly.
As far as my worst is concerned, though, and for me, it's got to be Elizabeth's daughter. She didn't have much to do. I would have been Roger. I would have agreed with you, but we did get about Roger in the paintings and stuff like this, and I really, really liked that. And I did like the Roger David situation, and Roger sticking to that. But for me, it was Mrs. Stoddard, because we get Mrs. Stoddard, and she gets a phone call that Burke is plane's gone missing,
right.
and then they find out that he's dead, and there wasn't a lot of empathy or compassion in her character, and it's not because of
any of them.
But the thing is to be fair, what we got from Elizabeth's daughter at this point is that she was very, very caring. She was very, very loving. And the thing is, and she was very, very happy. And then when she found out that Victoria and Bert were going to get married, she was over the moon. She's going to hold the party for them. She's going to do this. She's going to do that. And she's offering them a wing of her house, so that way they can have a home together and still be on the Collingwood house sort of thing. So that, and she's going to welcome Burke to the family, even though, and this is the way that she felt for Victoria. Yeah. And I think it's because what we got was kind of, and this is not Joan Bennett's fault, but what we got was a Joan Bennett coming in as a day player to do a couple days and then go off. And they didn't really think about how she would really react here. And even with David, it's like, we got someone who cares about David and worried about David, and should we put David into a psychiatric home or not? And it's kind of like she's just kind of there. And the reactions that we were getting from her weren't the reactions that we would have gotten from Elizabeth's daughter up until this point.
Well, especially if you go back to season 1, like, she was fiercely protective over David. So you think that she would have implemented more of that with that, because she's always been fiercely protective, even to the point of almost spoiling him when he should be punished. And nobody's allowed to punish David.
Yep.
So I'm surprised he changed on his own, actually, because no one punished him. Like, there was nothing that he learned from. But just to throw back,
Well, as the mother of boys and the grandmother of another, they're just mischievous, and that's just all there is to it.
I'm wondering why Roger was so against the West Wing.
He hates Burke.
But it really still, I thought he had come to terms with that. Apparently he had.
They still have a rivalry. He can't have two.
Apparently he hadn't. I thought that the two of them were apologizing. Whatever. Keith, go ahead. Keith is checking.
Let me put my theory here. Suppose David is Burke's.
Yeah.
How's that going to work out?
Oh God.
We'll never know, though.
But we'll never. Well, of course, we'll never know. But they always hinted about that, didn't they? In the early days, they hinted about this.
Burke is David's father. Yeah.
He also hinted about Victoria being, Mrs. Stoddard.
That's something
but we never find that out either.
Yeah, but the thing, as far as whether Victoria, I know that we have the case book and this is what was meant to be, but as far as the script is concerned and what we're fed in the script, it never feeds into that she may be Elizabeth's daughter. Of course, we do get a book later on, and we do get something in the case book that they were going to bring this out. But as far as what we've seen on screen, they never actually looked at this.
They bond in a weird maternally almost.
But as far as screen time is concerned, and what we saw from scripts and what we've actually seen on the screen, as far as David being Burke's, it was hinted at by Laura. It was hinted at by Roger.
Correct.
Quite a few times. So Roger basically says he's not his kid.
Yeah.
And Elizabeth goes, "How can you say that? He's a Collins?"
And
they played around with that.
I've always liked Mitchell Ryan's and David Hennessy's characters interact together. That's what I miss, because I loved when we would sneak over to the hotel, would visit Burke.
Fishing shack.
It was so entertaining, and with that, with Mitchell Ryan as Burke, that is totally believable because they hit it off and get along so well, even though David was just about to throw him under the bus and plant that valve on him. He totally regretted it after meeting him because they hit it off so well, and he actually liked him better than his own father. And the
one thing that Burke did have for David is that when he'd calling him Davy is the affectionate term for David.
Yeah.
Right.
That is the affectionate, personalized version of David. So
when he actually gave him something,
it's a bit like if your name is Catherine and someone calls you Katie, that's the affectionate being. That means you know that person and you love that person beyond calling them Catherine.
Joe also called him Davy. And
but it was more like Joe was doing it like a bigger brother sort of thing. That was
right,
kind of like,
exactly.
I'm dating Carolyn, so this is my little brother. I'm going to bring him in. So that was more like that.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, I thought of Davy and Goliath when I heard of that. I heard of that.
Yeah, I remember that. The little.
Remember that, Davy? But yeah, I think that was. Well, they had to sacrifice. And I don't think Anthony George was able to establish quite the level of camaraderie that Mitchell Ryan did establish. And that is just, and that's more of a tribute to Mitchell Ryan's acting abilities.
Even when he was in scenes with like Joan Bennett, when there was contention there, you still felt like they could have been pals and that they secretly admired each other. That's something
they respected
I really liked.
each other.
That's what I liked about their dynamic. Like Mitchell Ryan was really a good actor, and he just that element could not have been replaced.
But see, I also think that Anthony George's cards were stacked against him. For the simple fact is that this is the first time that we've seen a long-term character come in and take over a long-term character, a new actor taking over. I mean, okay, when Willie left, Willie was there for a week. Old Willie was there for a week.
Yeah.
New Willie came in. Old Sam was there for 3 or 4 episodes. New Sam came in, and then we got that all
Matthew
the time.
Morgan. Well, the first Matthew Morgan was there for a little while. I think he was there for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's true. I forgot about him.
But with Burke, Matthew Ryan was there for a year. And then new Burke comes. Do you know what I mean? And but like,
I thought he did okay with the Barnabas pissing contest in the new house there for a while. I mean, that was kind of enjoyable.
There's nothing wrong. I mean, there's nothing wrong with
on Barnabas'
George.
side.
I think the writers let him down. I think the writers terribly let him down, where they didn't write to his strengths. And
I agree with that.
And I do, as I said before, I think that let's get rid of we're going to get rid of the Burke character anyway, so why bother?
Wasn't that something, by the way the dream house that Vicky and Burke had fell apart because of Caleb Sayer Collins? And there's this whole undeveloped storyline that he lived 100 years ago and he was a loner and he didn't want it going to anybody other than the family.
Yeah.
Which, of course, excuse me, that would have been 1876.
But see, I also think that is a product of let's get rid of the Burke character right there, because why build a set like that, which is not a cheap set that they built.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it's like, okay, we built this set. Oh my God, old Burke, we got to get rid of old Burke because of the reasons going on behind the scenes. Oh my God, we got to bring new Burke. Well, we built a set. We might as well go through here and then let's drop it. Because, I mean, they would have spent a lot of money on that set that they had there. I mean, they had stairs, they had a solid wall, they had wood flooring. I mean, they even built a wood floor for that set. Normally, they don't even show the floor, and they normally kind of go up like this. Sort of thing. We won't show the feet, but this one's like they pulled back.
At least it wasn't a dirt floor like the basement.
Well, they also don't want to show the tracking marks if they're left.
So and when that storyline came up, that's when they changed the Burkes as well. So I think that's probably and then of course they must have struck. So that's why I think that they figured, well, we're just gonna get rid of Burke anyway. So let's get someone to finish off his storylines. But meanwhile, we've already, and you also got to remember that the new Burke came in like that. He had to come in and just do it. You know what I mean? Because they didn't have any time.
Yeah.
Old Burke didn't show up for work one day and he was fired the next, and new Burke came in the next day, sort of thing. The simple point, I mean, Mitchell Ryan left so quickly that Joe had to do his lines for one episode.
Right.
Yep.
So,
Must have been that day, basically, almost, you know?
Yeah. So, so I think, even though I don't like passive Burke, but I do think that if they were going to keep Burke, I think they would have written to his strengths, because they've done that with every time they changed the cast member and they got a new actor in.
Yeah.
But anyway, my weakest here was Elizabeth's daughter. I'm sorry. I loved Joan Bennett.
I can see that.
And I think the writers set her. I think the writers let her down a little bit. And I think that she's coming in and goes, okay, I'm going to do my 2 or 3 episodes. And okay, well, we got to spin this out really quickly. So boop, boop, on sort of thing. And, and it's very rare that we do get that with her. So I'm going to let her take the fall this time. Now, if something happens and everyone else wasn't as very strong, because everyone was strong in this character, she wouldn't have done it. But so I have to sacrifice the lamb. So goodbye, Joan.
Okay.
And that's just for this time, because later on she really shines in a lot of
Yes, she does.
Oh yeah. I mean, these are only for the
Right.
for our listeners out there, if you are coming in new, when we say our favorite and least favorite, it's only for the blocks that we're talking about. We're not talking
We
about
love all of
entirety
them.
Yep,
It
yep.
forces us to pick one.
Well, not all of them. There are some.
I
that
didn't pick one. I didn't pick one.
I don't like Murphy, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah. There's a couple of characters that will be coming across later, have come across previously, will never make the top 10. So.
Clunkers, yeah. Clunkers, yeah.
So this brings us to our Morning Has Broken segment, where we're going to give you our final thoughts, which we'll do these brief for you listeners, of our thoughts of episodes 331 to 352. And Jesse, what are your final thoughts of this block?
Well, this is actually probably one of my favorite sections. Whenever I go and rewatch, this is like one of the parts that I rewatch. I always rewatch. I skim through like Barnabas kidnapping Maggie, because some of those episodes draw on, but I really love like this whole like section right after Barnabas is introduced, right after the Jason McGuire. I kind of skip after the Jason McGuire stuff and go into this. And it's my favorite because all of the characters have something to do, like all of the main characters when they're still like all there. Because later on, we don't always get these characters because they're replaced by like newer actors. But Nancy Barrett is definitely my favorite.
I love her, period.
I know.
Carries the whack job kind of thing to a new.
I
just love her acting. I know. Oh, she resonates with me. I get her.
She's always been my favorite. Like at first, like in the very first season, especially the first few episodes, I didn't feel like she felt kind of awkward to me. Like her lines were awkward as all get out. But I think not only did she grow into it, but I think the writers knew how to write her and what worked for her. And she was always like the sunshine in the dark, dim Collinwood house. Like she was the one who could get away with wearing, bright colors and go-go boots, and the other characters would have to wear like Victorian stuff because that just fits them. But
right.
She stands out like not like a sore thumb, but like I don't know, like the good equivalent of that, whatever that is. But she is probably my favorite character of the whole show, especially for these, from the beginning to like now. I don't really care for her character later on when it gets to the 70s, like after they come back, like shortly thereafter, she kind of loses that same appeal to me. But for now, she's my favorite character for sure. Not that she's a bad actress, but she's like, I don't know. She's a really good character. One of my favorites.
And what about yourself, Vicky? What are your final thoughts of this block of episodes?
I like all the transitional stuff. We're starting to finally move in that direction where Dark Shadows is so famous for, with all the good stuff happening and the stories that evolve into the later episodes, which we never go into. But I just think this is a big transition block. And that's what I like about it. And I can't really talk about why I like the transition block because we're going to give away the next block. But anybody that's watched all these, they know what I'm talking about.
And what about yourself, Tom? Your final thoughts?
I have to agree with Vicky. I think that the transitions are very, very pertinent. I think it's developing the plot. Furthering now the relationship between Barnabas and Julia, and Julia verbalizes her feelings for him.
The Unholy Alliance.
To what's that, Vic?
The Unholy Alliance.
The Unholy Alliance, yes. Yeah, Vicky, the triangle of Vicky, Barnabas, and Julia. And although Vicky doesn't know what the hell she's getting into yet, but so you have that. I think that the Barnabas aging. It's a nice. Yeah,
that was like one of my favorites. I love how pissed off.
He's genuinely creepy there.
He's really up and creepy. I think it's great.
Absolutely. That really, it's a zets, as they say from my end of the woods, which means a push. So it is it's something to really. It's a novel development. Nobody was expecting that to happen in terms of his aging at that particular point, the way it did. And then recruiting Carolyn as his slave, and which has some very interesting developments coming up there as well, because now Carolyn knows what he is, and she's and what's going to happen, what's going to happen there, and is he going to lose control and make a vampire out of it? Well, that's we're just going to have to see what happens with that. The change of Burke dying, Woodward dying. That's a double whammy there. You get two characters out. A lot of things happening here, and as Keith has mentioned, a lot of plot lines intersecting and twisting with each other now to a really good degree. It's picking up.
And for me, I have to sit there and say, I think this is one of the strongest blocks that we've done. I quite like that the multiple storylines, the jumbling of the storylines, keeping everyone interested. And for me, as I said before, I do watch these on either Saturday or Sunday morning when I'm getting up and having a cup of tea and kind of brain dead, and I'm watching it. And I had to sit there and say that Isaac and Gary were actually peaked up and actually were like watching it and like interested. Interesting. So that tells you how strong that is, because normally I watch it and they're kind of like looking at me, rolling their eyes as they walk from outside to inside.
I get that a lot.
So for me, that made it very, very strong. And I have to sit there and say there's not a wasted episode here, and there's not a wasted line of dialogue. There's not a wasted storyline to be had. And I have to sit there and say that the writers and the acting are top of their game. And as you can say from the acting side of it, as you heard previously, I think we all had to struggle to find who our weakest actors were this time around. So it tells you how strong even the acting is. So for me, this is probably one of the strongest blocks that we've ever done so far.
The acting, as a matter of fact, weren't that many bloopers in the acting. Most of the bloopers were the technical gaffes, but the acting was really, with a couple of funny things. The acting was, you count the number of bloopers on the fingers of one hand. Very good job.
And so that brings us to the end of the Literary License Podcast, The Dark Shadows, episodes 331 to 352. Next month, we'll be doing episodes 353 and 374, and they were actually aired in November 1967. And to give you a little of a peek of what that will entail, is a seance is going to be held, and Victoria is going to be transported to 1795. The Barnabas origin story begins. We hear about Angelique, and Josette stands in the way, and Angelique practices witchcraft, and we'll let you know more as we sit there and unlock these episodes. And of course, next month will be the last of season 3 for the Literary License Podcast. So we'll be finishing off our Edgar Allan Poe with Two Evil Eyes, directed by George Romero and Dario Argento. And we'll also be doing Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure and Pulp Fiction for our 2-for-1. And our third episode, which will be the end of our European horror segment, we'll be doing Black Sabbath. And if you want to know what these all have in common, is that we'll be doing films that are anthology feelings to them, and how they take in the anthology film and we're able to transport these in 4 very unique films, and that's what we'll be covering. So that is good night for myself, and say good night, Tom.
Good night, everybody. Stay safe.
Good night, Jesse.
Have a good night, everybody.
Good night, Vicky.
Good night, everybody.
see you next week for our last episode of Edgar Allan Poe, where we'll do Black Cat and Curious Case of M. Vladimir in Two Evil Eyes, directed by George Romero and Carolyn.
I've been hearing symphonies. Before all I heard was silence. A rhapsody for you and me. And every melody is timeless. Life was stringing me along. Then you came and you cut me loose. Was solo singing on my own. Now I can't find the key without you. And now you're so